Hey, welcome back to Between the Hashmarks, the best podcast for all your breaking news, football, and fantasy football info, as well as all other major sporting news. Remember to follow us on iTunes as well as Facebook and YouTube, all at Between the Hashmarks. Today we are going to cover our usual waiver wire ads, premium DraftKings lineup, and our picks against the spread. But first, as always, this is my opening rant.
Your number one source for sports.
You know who I can't stand? Kevin Durant.
He looks like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton had a kid.
Now, who can argue with that?
I hate Boston.
I'm the biggest Miami Heat hater you'll ever meet.
I just don't understand where you're getting your bogus information from.
What the hell are you even talking about?
Well, I'm sorry you're too freaking sensitive to handle the truth.
You think I'm crazy? I'm just getting warmed up.
You're now Between the Hashmarks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe.
The baseball season is almost over, and some of the biggest news of the offseason has already broke. It's a sad day in the Bronx after a season of rebuilding, in quotes, turned into a trip to the ALCS, coming one game away from the World Series. Joe Girardi is out as Yankees manager after 10 years in pinstripes. After Game 2 of the ALDS and Girardi's blunder of a call, all of New York wanted his head on a plate. Those were rash emotions and why New York sport fans are the best. They are die-hard no matter what. Being the skipper of the New York Yankees is not an easy job, maybe the toughest in the majors. New York City comes with the most pressure to succeed in any sport, let alone the great New York Yankees. They are a world-class organization that is used to winning and winning only. Girardi's a top 5 manager in the game of baseball and possibly could be number 1. In 10 years as the Yankees skipper, he won 910 games and lost 710, a plus 200 for his career as Yankees manager, which is the best record in the majors since he became the manager of the Yankees in 2008. He won the AL East 3 times, made 2 ALCS, including this year, coming 1 game from the World Series, as well as winning the 2009 pennant and World Series. Needing a new voice in the locker room is just an excuse, considering majority of the players he managed in his tenure with the Yankees have moved on from baseball or in general. He had a whole new club under him this year, and he will be sorely missed. Getting rid of Joe Girardi might be the worst decision any baseball club can make this offseason. He was such a vital part to why the Yankees succeeded this year and why they've been successful over the last 10 years, and I don't know if there's a manager who is better fit to manage the New York Yankees than Joe Girardi, and I think this is a colossal mistake, and I really think there's a chance the Yankees take another step back next year, losing Joe Girardi as their skipper.
So, I know I'm supposed to be disagreeing with you. This is the part where we disagree with each other. But as a Red Sox fan, when I heard the news yesterday, I threw a party because of how awesome this news is for Red Sox fans. Because, like you said, Joe Girardi had a new team under a rebuilding year, air quotes. They went to ALCS and they almost went to the World Series.
They really could have been in the World Series.
Exactly. And the fact that they thought that Joe Girardi was the problem with this team is incredibly laughable. I saw a statistic the other day where it was coaches that have won more than 500 games in their career and their percentage as a winning as a coach. He was like 13th or 12th all-time percentage. He's something like a 571 win percentage, which is insanely high in baseball. It's not like football where you need to be winning 14-2 or 13-3 every year. If you win 100 games and you lose 60, you had a really good season. And that's only like a 60 win percentage. So he has had an amazing tenure with the New York Yankees, and the fact that Brian Cashman thought that he was the problem is hysterically laughable.
It bothers me so much as a Yankees fan, and you know what? Brian Cashman made a lot of great moves, and I know he got lucky with some of it. Luck is part of being his position. You can say Didi Gregorius shouldn't be the player he is right now. Nobody expected that coming out of that trade. That trade looks phenomenal now, but he got lucky with that. Brian Cashman needs to be the one that gets let go in this situation because the players love Girardi. Look at what Todd Frazier came out and said, and he was only there for, 2.5 months?
Yep.
And he had Girardi's back over everybody else.
Yeah.
Brand new guy to the locker room. That's the kind of manager that Joe Girardi was. He was a player's manager. I truly don't think that there will be a worse move this offseason. Even if a baseball player signs a $500 million contract at the age of 35, it won't be worse than letting Joe Girardi go with the current roster that the Yankees have.
It's just baffling. If I was a Yankees fan, I would be absolutely pissed right now because you took a team. You guys, in many eyes, weren't supposed to make the playoffs this year.
Next year.
Yeah, next year was the year where you were going to take that leap and boom, you're going to be in the playoffs. But this year, you made the playoffs. You had a really successful playoff run with such a young team. So the fact that Joe Girardi was able to get this team to that level, like he might win Manager of the Year.
He should. he really should. And you know what? Mark Teixeira said something that kind of upset me a little bit. Is that Joe Girardi was too intense sometimes and that maybe he didn't communicate well with his players. Well, you know what? I'd rather have a manager who's too intense and is too into the game than somebody maybe who doesn't care as much. And you know what? That says a lot about Joe Girardi's character, and that's the kind of character that I want as my skipper of my baseball team.
See, when they started talking about this after the blunder that he made in the ALDS of Game 2, and I was thinking to myself, like he just made a mistake. It's one bad call, but if you look at the tenure of Joe Girardi, he's made 100 good calls. So it's like I was thinking, like, how is this possible? But then when they won that series and moved on to the next round, I was like, okay, this talk is going to be over. And then boom, they lose, and then what do you know? He's gone. It's like it's I don't understand it at all.
I don't either. In other words, please tell me that this may be somewhat of it's like the Patriots letting Bill Belichick walk for nothing.
Yeah.
In a sense. Or like letting the Chiefs let Andy Reid walk for nothing.
Yeah,
These
exactly.
great coaches who really, there are certain managers, certain coaches who really have an effect on the players, have an effect on the team. And those are some of the names. And those coaches and managers, they earn the money that they get paid, and not all do. And the Yankees just lost a great one.
I think a lot of this comes down to Brian Cashman and Joe Girardi really butting heads, and Brian Cashman wanting a guy that's going to manage more like how Brian Cashman would manage, which I think would be terrible because I think Brian Cashman, I was telling you this off the air, that I think Brian Cashman is sort of like Danny Ainge. Like, yeah, they're decent general managers, but they got pretty lucky with some of the moves that they've made.
Oh, absolutely.
And if it weren't for certain coaches that they had, that they wouldn't really have been able to put this together, because Brian Cashman, over the past however long he's been the GM for the Yankees, he's never addressed the number one issue that the Yankees have needed every year, which is starting pitching. He keeps bringing in the next big bat, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, okay, yes, bring in the next big bat. I don't care. You don't have any starting pitching. I don't care about that at all. So it's just funny to see that the guy who doesn't, in my mind, doesn't really have a full grasp on the game of what the Yankees need ends up getting rid of somebody who actually had that idea of what the Yankees need, and he made the right decisions for the Yankees.
Yes, and something else I wanted to bring up was that, you know what this kind of reminds me of? And it's really ironic because it has to do with the Yankees.
What's that?
Joe Torre getting let go.
Yeah.
It's almost identical. Nobody wanted Joe Torre gone.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted Joe Torre to stay. He was a great manager. When you thought of the Yankees as a young kid, you thought of Joe Torre. I remember seeing him sitting there in his puffy blue jacket that says Yankees across, and you know, it's just he never sat up by the fence. He always sat back in the dugout. Joe Torre. I remember this stuff. And Joe Girardi was the next Joe Torre.
Yeah.
He was the next great Joe.
Yeah. And
I want to ask you a question. What do you think about the possibility of A-Rod becoming the next Yankees manager?
I think it's absolutely hysterical. I don't think it will happen.
It won't, but I love it.
It's a fun idea to think about, but there's no way that that they would bring him in as the manager just because of everything that's gone on with A-Rod in the past.
And I think he's still on their payroll as a player. But
he's getting paid to analyze the game and paid by them.
In reality, though, I think he would be a great fit only because he knows the organization well, he knows the players well, he's young, he can relate to them, and also he may have one of the best baseball minds that's ever stepped foot on a diamond, and that's what you want in a manager.
Well, one thing, you kind of touched on this a little bit, like they got very lucky when they got rid of Joe Torre to get Joe Girardi. Like, that is an insane amount of luck that you were able to get somebody of that quality to manage your team. What are the chances of them getting somebody of that quality to, again, like, how are they going to hit the jackpot again?
20 plus years of consistent, solid, possibly best managing job in baseball came from the New York Yankees over the last 25 years. Over the course of it, if you take all 25 years or so that both Joes managed, I'd say that the combination they had the best success overall in the majors.
Quick question for you. Where do you think Joe Girardi goes, if anywhere at all?
Where do I think he goes? My honest opinion, I think he takes the year off.
Yeah.
I think there's a solid chance, though, that Don Mattingly gets the can from Derek Jeter, and Derek Jeter brings in Joe Girardi, knowing how good of a manager
that would be insanely smart of the Marlins to do.
And I think it's a real possibility. Maybe next year too. Maybe Jeter gives Mattingly 1 year, sees how he does, and brings in Girardi. But I think the Girardi-Jeter combination of Jeter playing for Girardi, knowing the kind of manager he is, I think that's where he ends up, is Miami, eventually down the line somehow.
Yeah, no, I also agree with that. I think Girardi isn't going to jump into it really quick. A lot of people are saying he's going to the Nationals, and I think that would be really good for the Nationals to do, but I just don't see that actually happening at all.
You know, so that being said, I hate Brian Cashman at this very second. I might not halfway through next season, but right now I do. But I have some players that you shouldn't hate in the NFL, that you should be picking up on your waiver wire and putting in your draft cake lineups this weekend, right here on BTH.
You're listening to Between the Hashmarks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe, brought to you by an unknown sponsor we don't have yet. Now back to the show.
All right, and we're back here on BTH, and that was one heck of a segment. I wonder what's going to happen with this Joe Girardi situation. Not really sure. I'm really curious to see how it plays out and where he does end up. Whatever club it is extremely lucky. Moving on, let's go into some NFL news, some football. Let's start with our waiver wire, our DraftKings lineup. Mine are going to go hand in hand. My waiver wire pickup this week is a streaming quarterback who is my quarterback for DraftKings, Andy Dalton. Yes, weeks 1 and 2 combined, he had 11.5 points, 2 and then 9.5. Everybody said, oh, he is done. He got a new offensive coordinator. Since then, 16.3, 29.3, 18.3, and then he didn't have such a great game against the Steelers, but the Steelers are his rival. It always ends up being like that, and not to mention the game was in Pittsburgh. Regardless of that, he still had 2 touchdowns, although he did have the 2 interceptions. I think Andy Dalton is a must-start this week. Andy Dalton is going up against Indianapolis, who's ranked 28th against opposing quarterbacks. He is only 5,700 in DraftKings to go up against the Colts defense, who is miserable. Having AJ Green, who had an off game last week, who I believe will have a monster game this week. Andy Dalton, by far and away, I think the biggest steal at the quarterback position this week.
All right, my player is Josh Doxson of the Washington Redskins. Yes, there are other wide receivers in this team. There is Terrell Pryor. There is Jamison Crowder. But starting since about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Josh Doxson has been getting more snaps than Terrell Pryor. Terrell Pryor has been dropping a lot of passes all year long, and he really has not connected with this team. If you go back to your overall drafts in fantasy, you had Terrell Pryor coming off in the 5th, 6th, 7th round,
which is high,
very high. You're investing a lot in Terrell Pryor. He has not delivered at all. Jamison Crowder was a guy you were taking in the 8th, 9th, 10th round maybe. He looks absolutely lost out there, except when he's on special teams. Josh Doxson is starting to get the targets. He's starting to get some receptions, and he's developing a little bit of a relationship here with Kirk Cousins. He's only 24.5% owned in all of ESPN leagues. There was an 11.4 jump this week. I'm not saying he's going to ball out this week, although I do think he has a very favorable matchup. He is playing the Dallas secondary, which is absolutely terrible. But going forward, this is the receiver in Washington that you absolutely want to own. Going straight into my DraftKings picks, quarterback, I have Phillip Rivers of the San Diego Chargers going against the 32nd ranked New England Patriots defense. Phillip Rivers is the man. He is. If you look at what the Chargers have been doing the last 3 weeks, watch out. The Chargers are starting to win some games because they don't care who is coming to their games and who is not. They're going to ball out because they have 8 road games this year and they have 8 neutral games this year. They don't care. Phillip Rivers is starting to ball out, and this offensive line is giving him protection. When he has protection, he's able to throw the ball down the field. Give me Phillip Rivers for 6,300. Who's your quarterback, James?
I got Andy Dalton.
That's right. You already told us.
I got Andy Dalton. But going into my running backs, I want to start with my 2 running backs. I have Bilal Powell, great investment, 4,800, and James White, 4,900. This is PPR. James White is on pace for a career number in receptions this year. He is Tom Brady's security blanket. Oh, and let me add, they're going up against the Chargers defense, who is 20th against opposing running backs and give up at least 5 catches per game to opposing running backs. James White this week is a must play. And Bilal Powell, he's going up against Atlanta. 18th rushing defense. We've seen Atlanta get slashed down the middle against the run. I think the Jets lean on the run heavy when they can. Bilal Powell, you cannot go wrong at 4,800 with him this week. Who are your running backs?
My running backs this week are Chris Thompson and Christian McCaffrey. Sort of the same premise you're going with. It's PPR. They're both PPR backs. And Chris Thompson has been absolutely dominating defenses this year. If you look at all of fantasy, he is the 8th rated running back in all of fantasy over the course of the single year. He's going against a terrible Cowboys secondary. I was just preaching terrible Cowboys secondary. They are 29th against running backs and 23rd against wide receivers, which, let's face it, Chris Thompson is essentially a wide receiver. He is getting insane amount of touches, and he is relatively cheap. He's only 5,800. Let me just read you just his numbers week by week from week 1 all the way to now. 15.6, 25.6, 33.8, 1 clunker, 2.7 in week 4. By week, 20.8 and 17.4. You cannot find that kind of consistency anywhere else. My other running back is Christian McCaffrey. I love these PPR running backs, and he is starting to find his groove with this offense now. Way more comfortable than ever before, and he is the 10th ranked running back in all of fantasy this week, going against a really good matchup against Tampa Bay, who is having, I don't understand why Tampa Bay is having trouble with their defense this year, but they're 21st against running backs this season. Going straight into my wide receivers, I have Nelson Aguilar of the Philadelphia Eagles, Antonio Brown of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and my boy, I was just telling you about Josh Doxson, is my sleeper pick. Nelson Aguilar going against the San Francisco 49ers. Look, this could be a game where Carson Wentz is balling out the last couple of games. This could be a game where he steps back just a little bit because they know they can win this game. They're playing a winless 49ers team, so they're not going to be winning this game by 4 touchdowns or anything like that, but expect them to have a really healthy lead, maybe 10 points, 2 touchdowns. And Nelson Aguilar has had a touchdown in 5 games this year. 5 games out of the 7 they've played. It seems like he has really developed as not the number 1 receiver because he's not on the outside, but as a slot guy, he is getting Carson Wentz's eye every single game for numerous targets a game.
Let me throw a little monkey wrench into that because I got Nelson Aguilar as my number 1 wide receiver this week too.
Very good, very good. Antonio Brown, duh. I mean, Antonio Brown is a must start every week. I understand he is really expensive. He's 8,800 this week, but he is absolutely worth it, especially on Sunday night, going against the Detroit Lions, who have been torched by wide receivers this year. Antonio Brown is obviously a must start. And Josh Doxson, just telling you about him, going against a terrible Dallas secondary, and he's only 3,900. He's great value at this pick. Who are your receivers besides Aguilar?
I want to mention that I love the Chris Thompson pick. I actually had him in there, but I replaced him with Bilal Powell, and you're going to hear why in 1 second.
Okay.
So My other two wide receivers are going to be Will Fuller this week and A.J. Green. A.J. Green is a must start. If you're playing Andy Dalton, you are banking on Andy Dalton and A.J. Green having big games together. Enough said there. And Will Fuller. Will Fuller, yes, he hasn't been taking advantage of everything per se. He only has 8 receptions on the year in the 3 games that he's played, weeks 4, 5, and 6. But he's got 154 yards in those 8 receptions and has 5 touchdowns. That is an insane amount of touchdowns in only 8 catches. With only 14 targets on the year, his points per game, 19.9, 20.2, 14.2. Yes, he's playing Seattle, but I expect DeAndre Hopkins to be shadowed by Richard Sherman, which should leave some field open for Will Fuller. Neither will be double covered this week. Seattle does not play that way. They like to play man-to-man. Seattle believes in their defense, and I think that the Texans might be able to take them over the top. The Texans might be able to take them over the top. This is a sketchy pick, but I say every week, if you don't have at least one sketchy pick in your lineup, you are not trying to win, because it's impossible to win without a sketchy pick in your lineup. And now I want to jump right in to my flex, and I'm going to skip the tight end. I'll go back to it. This is why I switched out Chris Thompson for Bilal Powell. My flex this week is wide receiver Julio Jones.
Okay.
If I have a chance to take Julio and put him in my lineup, I have to. He's 8,400 this week. He's going up against the Jets secondary. They're not all that great. 22nd against wide receivers. Julio Jones hasn't had the best season so far. I expect him to have a big game against the Jets this weekend in New York. And you cannot go wrong with Julio Jones in your flex. Who's your flex?
My flex is Devin Funchess of the Carolina Panthers, and I believe Carolina is going to have a field day against Tampa Bay this week. They've really been dominating Tampa Bay every single game that they've played them over the past few years, and it doesn't seem like Kelvin Benjamin is that much ahead of Devin Funchess in targets and receptions as far as how much Cam Newton actually likes him. You can actually get Kelvin Benjamin for about 500 more, but why not take the value and get almost the same thing for less money? That is why I'm taking Devin Funchess. Going right into my tight end. Now you knew when I said Phillip Rivers, you know I was going to get something on San Diego as far as receivers. Nope, I got it as a tight end. I got Hunter Henry, 4,800. Hunter Henry is really starting to emerge. He's really finally starting to take over, pushing Antonio Gates out of the way. Yes, he got his career-breaking touchdown. Now move aside because it's the Hunter Henry show. He has been scoring consistently every single week, except for the past 4 weeks in PPR standards. 9.6, 13.2, 14.0, 11.3, going against a terrible New England defense. Expect a possible breakout game for Hunter Henry this week. Who's your tight end?
I'm going to go with the most generic tight end that I can go with. I really couldn't fit anybody else in there, but why not? Jason Witten. He's hit or miss. I understand that. But he has such big games, and he's going up against Washington, the 30th ranked team against opposing tight ends. We just saw Washington get smoked by Zach Ertz. I expect a similar game this weekend from Jason Witten. Okay. Going right into my defense, I'm going to go with the Buccaneers defense. Defense is hit or miss. Carolina has looked awful. Cam Newton is so inconsistent. I'm going to bank on Cam Newton being inconsistent again this week. I'm going to go with the Buccaneers defense and special teams.
How much is the Buccaneers defense?
2,600.
This is hilarious because we are going toe-to-toe with this pick because I have the Carolina Panthers defense and special teams for 2,800. Now my rationale is what I said before is Carolina has really just owned this series since Cam Newton has come to town. And it just seems like Tampa Bay doesn't have that home field, and Jameis throws a lot of interceptions. I think Carolina, certain weeks, yes, they're super inconsistent, but if you go back to last week, they dominated the Bears last week. They lost, but that wasn't on the defense at all. The defense only gave up 3 points, and when the one chance when the Bears were looking like they were going to score, they absolutely denied them. Give me the Carolina defense for 2,800. Now coming up next, we are on an insane rate against the spread. We have 2 games that we both agree on. We have 1 game where we go head-to-head. Stay tuned to figure out what those games are so you can win some money. You're listening to BTH.
listening to Between the Hashmarks with James Koklak and Sean McCabe, brought to you by an unknown sponsor we don't have yet. Now back to the show.
And welcome back to BTH. We're giving you your favorite segment here. We're winning you money every week. We're at an insane rate. I'm 19-11 against the spread. That's a 63%. James, you are absolutely killing it right now. 21-9 against the spread. That is good for 70%. Now look, you only need to be 54% to not work a straight edge job and live in the big fancy house and making a couple $100,000 a year if you were doing this professionally.
I know where my next profession is going to be.
Yeah, we're just going to quit our jobs and just become...
You ready?
yeah, right.
I'll drive us to Vegas right now.
But we got some insane games for you, loaded games. Like I said before, we have 2 games we agree on, one where we go head-to-head. James, you got a game for me?
No, but I do have something I want to bring up really quickly before we go into the games. I want your opinion on the hit last night that Joe Flacco took. Did you think it was dirty? Did you think it was late? Did you think Kiko Alonso could have held up? Do you think that there was no holding up and he was already in the process of going towards the hit? What is your opinion on that? Because I didn't think it was that dirty. Yes, it deserved a flag, but I don't think it deserves a suspension or a fine. I think it's the game of football.
I would say that he should have let up, and based on what we have seen in the rule with what Danny Trevathan did to Devonta Adams, I think there should be a 1-game suspension. Not that I think that there actually should be a suspension, but because of there's a precedent set this year, yes, there absolutely should, especially what they're trying to protect quarterbacks all over the place. If they want to be consistent with how they've been dealing with it, then yes, I think he deserves a suspension. Not a fine, but a suspension, because that is actually going to hurt the team more than... What
was the first thing that went through your mind when you saw that hit?
I didn't think it was incredibly dirty. I think it's like, dude, you know the rules of the game of football right now. You need to not make that hit. There's 15, and we should move on. But not... Initial reaction, no, I don't think he should have this suspension or this fine. But based on how they've been ruling things over the past year or 2 years, he should be suspended.
Okay, that's fair enough. I agree with that, actually. That just based on what everybody else has been suspended for, okay, I just personally, and you agree that all those suspensions probably shouldn't have been suspensions either. But moving forward, we can go right into our picks now. And I'm going to start with probably the easiest pick of the week, in my opinion. This game is in Detroit. Pittsburgh is a 3-point favorite. I'm taking Pittsburgh all the way. There's no way that Detroit's coming within 3 points. Right now, Pittsburgh is on a mission. They look phenomenal after being in so much turmoil earlier in this season. Pittsburgh by 3.
Yeah, no, I agree that I think Pittsburgh is going to win this game. I just couldn't bring myself to actually bet on this game because Big Ben is a different quarterback on the road, and I just don't trust him on the road. And it's really hard to trust anything about the Steelers this year because they have a game where they look like they are going to win the Super Bowl, and then they get blown out by the Jags at home, and then they go and they on the road and they beat Kansas City. Not really that impressive, like offensively wise, but they still did it, and then they come back and then they slaughter Cincinnati. So they're just too inconsistent for me to really bet on. But I do like that pick. My first pick here is the Atlanta Falcons at -5.5 against the New York Jets. Look, the Atlanta Falcons, yes, they are not the same team as last year, but they are way more talented than the New York Jets, and eventually that talent is going to start overriding itself, and it's going to start finally showing. And if they can stay true to the running game, because the past couple weeks, why they've lost these games gotten blown out against New England, lost to the Miami Dolphins, because they abandoned the damn running game. They've been running the ball well when they do run the ball, and they have 2 dynamic running backs, and when you have that kind of unpredictability in the offense, you are able to really dominate. And this defense has been shut down. They've only given up 23 points against New England. They only gave up 20 points against the Miami Dolphins. They shut them down the entire first half. Give me the Atlanta Falcons at -5.5.
I love that pick just solely on the fact that the Falcons have so much talent and the Jets are so depleted of talent at the moment. This should be a wipe. The Falcons should blow them out of the water. If they don't, I will be surprised as a Jets fan.
Yeah.
Moving forward, though, Dallas, 2-point favorite at Washington. This is a no-brainer. Who do you think I got?
Dallas?
Yes. No-brainer. No-brainer.
Yeah, so this is one of the games that we agree on. This is our double like here. I also have the Cowboys at -2. And look, they have owned this series for a long time. I think they've won 12 of the last 17 straight up, and they've just completely dominated them on the road and at home. But this game is in Washington. The thing about Washington here is I've noticed something here. When they've had this cluster injury where they've kind of took an injury on the wide receivers with their offensive linemen, and when you have those kind of nicks and bruises, especially on the offensive line, it really starts to be a detriment to your quarterback, and that's why I like the Dallas Cowboys. Going forward, my next game here, I like the Indianapolis Colts against Cincinnati. They're getting +10.5. This is an insane number to me at +10.5. Look, I understand the Indianapolis Colts are probably one of the worst teams in the NFL right now, especially with Andrew Luck not coming back. But Jacoby Brissett is a viable starter in the NFL, and he is he got absolutely torched against probably the best secondary in this game that we have right now in the Jacksonville Jaguars. Cincinnati, their defense is good, but it's not that good. I expect them to be able to throw the ball down the field. Jacoby Brissett is willing to take those chances. I expect Cincinnati to win this game, win by maybe a touchdown, but they're not winning by more than 10.5 points.
That's the whole reason why I couldn't go with this game, was because the spread was too high for me. 10.5 is a ton. That means that they've got to win by more than a touchdown and a field goal. Yeah. They gotta win by 11 points there.
And since Cincinnati's not one of those teams that they're trying to run up the score, that they're just trying to find wins.
Yeah. And I expect AJ Green and Andy Dalton to have a big game.
Yes.
But I don't expect them to win by 10.5. No. So therefore, I do like the Colts pick here. It was those games I tend to stay away from. But I did go with a team that has a +5.5 as an underdog this week, and that's the Texans at Seattle. I'm going with the Texans here. Seattle has looked better each and every game, and they always look better moving forward into the season. But the Texans' offense has been lively the last couple weeks that they've played. I know they had a bye last week, but the 3 weeks before that, they have looked lively. They have looked awesome. They've been putting up points. They look fast.
Against good defenses, too.
They look like they could be on their way to being the number one offense in the league if everything goes right. I do believe that there's a chance that they could win this game. I also think Seattle has a really good shot at winning this game. This is a tough game to pick, but I don't think either team would win by more than 5 points, and the spread is 5.5. I'm going with the Texans here.
Yeah, no, I was going to pick this game as one of my games, but I just couldn't find myself to do it because I don't, as much as Deshaun Watson has really impressed me this year, I just don't trust him in Seattle going against the 12th man. And just Seattle, it's that time of year where they start picking things up. And I think Seattle is going to win this game by about a field goal or so. But it could be a touchdown and then you'd be screwed. So I just couldn't bring myself to actually do this game. But I think the taking the Texans is very sharp.
Little side note about this game, DeAndre Hopkins has sat out practice this week, and the Texans actually had something went on where they were all going to leave practice due to what the owner said, so They are having some turmoil over there. But that's a side note. Who's your next game?
My next game is I have the New Orleans Saints -9 at home against the Chicago Bears. Now the Bears have looked really good with the new addition of Mitch Trubisky. He's impressed me. Didn't have a good game last week, but they have been really rallying around him. But when you're rallying around and you're having that kind of confidence and you're having that surge, you want to have home games. You don't want to be going on the road. And the New Orleans Saints are one of the biggest surprises this year. Drew Brees is back in form, and they score points, especially at home. You saw what they did to Detroit a couple weeks ago. They put up an insane amount of points. This team, the Chicago Bears, their defense isn't terrible, but they are going to have a rough time in New Orleans. Give me the Saints -9.
I have the Saints at -9 too, so this is the other game that we do agree on. And the reason I have the Saints is because they used to have, and they look like they're getting back to that, the best home field advantage in the National Football League. It was almost impossible to go into the Superdome and win a game. Up until about 3 years ago when they started to lose games in the Superdome consistently, going to the Superdome was known as, I'm going to New Orleans and I'm going to lose this football game because you're playing Drew Brees. And the Saints, and at home they were unbeatable. They look like they're getting back to that. -9 is a no-brainer for me.
And it looks like this defense is finally turning things around. This is a defense that we can start to begin to trust a little bit, especially after the first 2 weeks of the season. They started out terribly, and then since then, their defense has looked on point every single week. This is a defense that you can start to begin to trust.
Just a little fact about that to back up your point. I actually picked up... I have Seattle's defense in my ESPN league. I will show you right here. They are on my bench. For who? I picked up the New Orleans Saints defense this week. Why? Because, yes, Seattle's going up against the great offense and the Texans. And look, if you go and look at the Saints defense, they started with -5, -8, and then the next 4 weeks after that, including a bye, which was week 5, 15, 14, 32, and 6. Those numbers are unheard of as a fantasy defense. I'm going to go with the hot hand in the New Orleans defense, and this should be an easy win for the Saints. My last pick, though, this is the one that we're going head-to-head with.
Yes, we are.
Tampa Bay, 1.5 favorite over Carolina. I'm taking Tampa Bay here. This is going to be, I think, the closest game of the week. In my opinion, which may not mean much to you, this should be a pick. This should be a pick to me. But I'm going to take Tampa Bay. I think their offense clicks a little bit more than Carolina's at the moment. I know Jameis Winston throws a lot of interceptions. This will be a close game. I'm going to give the edge to Tampa Bay right now. This is probably the toughest pick of the week for me, though.
Yeah. I couldn't disagree more. I think Carolina is going to absolutely slaughter Tampa Bay. I don't think this game is going to be close. I did get Carolina at +1 in this, and now you were right about that, though. The game should be a pick'em, and what is it right now? It is a pick'em right now if we were to bet right this very second.
So that shows you right there. That shows you that we really do know what we're talking about, because neither of us have it at a pick'em. We both agree it should be a pick'em. We go and look, and what's it at? A pick'em.
Yeah.
Trust us, would you?
Yeah, for real. But Carolina, I've been preaching it all damn podcast today. They have been owning this series. Tampa Bay has crappy home field advantage.
So let me ask you a question, though. We both have it at a different spread.
Yeah.
You look right now to pick them.
Yeah.
You want to change them? Pick them head to head. Pick them. Winner takes it. No spread. That's what it's at right now. We're on air.
Fuck yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. That's the most updated. Let's do it. So either way, I think that a 1-point favorite, 1-point spread doesn't really make much of a difference, because I would say more than 90% of games don't have a 1-point difference at the end. So, but who's gonna take it this week? Last time we went head to head, you know what happened?
No.
Atlanta, Miami.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that was the game where I was looking like a hell of a genius, and I'm just looking at my TV like, screw you, James, I got this, and then boom, Steve Sarkisian doesn't know how to make second half adjustments.
Well, I'm not gonna lie, I actually picked the Dolphins to win last night in my head. That was not supposed to be here on the podcast, and they got smoked. So it happens, though. That's why I'm 70%, and I'm not 100% on the year. You aren't going to get them all right.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast that we had for you today. We gave you our rant, Joe Girardi. We gave you our player to pick up for your team. We gave you our DraftKings lineups, and we gave you the picks against the spread. We're winning you money every week. You better listen to one of us.
If you have one guess who's going to be the next Yankees manager, one name. Mine's A-Rod.
Wow. Wild card, Dusty Baker.
Dusty Baker? Okay, we'll see who's right. That'll come later on in the offseason, so we'll have to wait and see for that. But it was great. It's great coming over today. Great doing this podcast again.
Yep. And please like us on Facebook, listen to us on YouTube, subscribe to our channel. You can also access us on iTunes and the Android podcast app. You are listening to BTH.